Hello and welcome to How to Film Weddings. My name is Patrick and I want to talk to you guys about the brand new, recently announced and launched GH6 from Panasonic. Let's get into this. So I should let you guys know that I have actually been shooting on the GH5s and the GH5S for at least 3 or 4 years now, and I am so excited about the announcement of the GH6. I've been looking for some improvements on the GH5. There's just some compromises that I've had to make in order to get the footage that I want, or some things that I just couldn't do. And to see some of the improvements on the new GH6 is great, but there's also some concerns. And from a wedding filmmaker perspective, I want to share those concerns with you. I want to share those improvements with you and let you guys know what I believe, if this is going to be a camera for wedding filmmakers or if it's time to start looking for another camera. So let's talk a little bit about my original hopes for the new GH6. When I first heard almost a year ago that the GH6 was coming, I made a checklist. I'm like, all right, there are certain things that I need for this camera to work, to be perfect for me. So that way the compromises that I was having to make, I wouldn't have to make anymore. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted was full vlog. Vlog L had been working just fine, but I just have compared my images to some other people's. I was able to shoot on some cameras that did provide full vlog, and I could just see that the highlight roll off, the retention that you're able to get in full vlog was so much better than Vlog L. So I am really excited to say that the GH6 now does provide full vlog, so that's really cool. One of the other things that I've been hoping for is phase detect autofocus. Now, before I moved to the GH5, I was actually shooting on a Canon 5D Mark IV, and I really loved the autofocus there, and I didn't think that I missed it as much. But as I kept getting through the years, I'm like, oh, there's so many shots that I just missed it by that much because I had to manual focus, and I just missed it by a hair, even with the focus peaking. And sometimes it made the shot unusable. Sometimes I was able to work around it. But to have more reliable autofocus was important. And we'll get into that later in the video about what the new autofocus system is like and everything and how that performs. The other thing was I just wanted some better low light. It was hard enough for me to have the GH5 that I couldn't really take much higher than 1600. I would take it to like 2500 if I absolutely had to, but it was just hard enough that I couldn't do that, and then I had to swap to my GH5S to do that. But then I'm a handheld shooter, and then I lost a lot of stabilization. I had to get really good at that really quick, but there was still just some compromises that I had to make there that like I don't want to have to think about on the day when it comes like, all right, I'm in a low light scenario, I have to swap to this camera, but now I have to be extra careful because I have to move a certain way now than I was prior. And it was just mental energy that I could have been putting somewhere else, and I was finding myself getting more exhausted on the day mentally just because I'm constantly thinking about what I have to do differently between the two different cameras. So I really wanted improved low light capability, and overall I just really wanted better image quality. I think the 4K in the GH5 looked amazing, but it was just feeling a bit too soft for me. When I would shoot in that, there were times when I would shoot in the 1080 because I was able to get 60 frames per second in 10-bit in that with shooting internally. And then of course I lost resolution a lot more. So to be able to have the means to get the best image quality and not have to make any compromises as far as resolution or frame rates is important for me. So let's get a little bit more then into the new specs of the GH6 to see how my original hopes have been met with that. That makes sense. I'm really just kind of reading off some notes on my screen. The event happened a couple hours ago, so I'm still a little scattered, so bear with me. So one of the new specs of this camera is dynamic range boost. Now, what that really means is that it's actually taking the clean shadow details at ISO 2000 and the highlights at ISO 250 So you're getting that detail from both ends and it's converging it into one. There's a lot more science behind it, but from what I was able to gather in the last like 45 minutes, that's kind of what's working there. And it's actually making the image a lot cleaner. Now, when you are shooting at that, you have to be shooting in Vlog at ISO 2000. You cannot go lower than that. So you are going to need an ND filter. You might have to stop down with your aperture a little bit, but I promise it's going to look so much cleaner. However, if you do have that off, you can shoot in Vlog all the way down to what I believe is ISO 250. So you're not just stuck at shooting at 2000 whenever you want to shoot in Vlog. That would be crazy. I would have a hard time with that, but it looks like you can actually use a wider range of ISOs if you have the dynamic range boost off. But from what I've seen in other people's reviews, from what I've seen in sample videos, the dynamic range boost really cleans up your image and it really gives you so much more wiggle room in post when it comes to correcting your footage. So I would recommend keeping that on if you do go for this camera. Some other things, they have improved a lot of the features in the high frame rate and variable frame rate. With high frame rate, you actually can get audio in your camera. I can't remember what the limitations are. I think it's up to 120 frames per second in 4K and high frame rate, and you can actually get up to 300 in 1080 in variable frame rate. Now, if you do use variable frame rate, it is going to cut the audio out, but everything will also be in 10-bit, so you don't have to switch to 8-bit anymore when you want to do those super slow-mo features. So that's actually kind of cool. And in my experience, there's not many times where I have to go any higher than 120. Heck, I rarely use 120 anyways, but the fact that I can use that in 4K, I can keep the audio in there if I need to. If I accidentally kept that feature on and I caught something that had audio that I wanted to use, I still had that. And I'm able to get that in 10-bit at a much higher resolution. So that's really cool. We do now have USB-C charging and soon to be recording to an SSD. I think the SSD thing is going to be a future firmware upgrade. I don't know if that's going to be in the model that gets sent out originally. But what's really cool is that you can now use your USB-C port to do multiple features. For me, I will likely, if I get this camera, I would likely charge the camera with that, keep the battery going a little bit more, maybe plug it into a battery bank or a V-mount battery or something like that, and just give myself more juice that way. But if you're that kind of person that wants to shoot in the higher bit rates and you just want the most memory possible and you can do that to an SSD, you can do that too. So you have options, and we all love having options to choose from. One of the other things, it's not really a new spec because it's actually old technology but improved, is the autofocus. And I told you we'd be getting there, and we're getting there right now. The autofocus is still depth by defocus, or I think that's what it's called. The DFD autofocus, it's contrast based. So it's not phase detect like what you'd see in Sony or the dual pixel autofocus from Canon. So it's not quite perfect in my opinion. I've looked at some reviews and you still get some of that pulsing in the background. You still don't get that tack sharp accuracy that you can get out of Sony and Canon. So that's a little bit disappointing for me. It does have some improvements from what I've seen. People have shown, I've seen reviews where people are showing like things from Sony and the original GH5 and the new GH6, and you can see a dramatic improvement with the GH6 compared to the GH5. Could it be used in certain scenarios? Absolutely. Is it reliable enough to use on a full wedding day? I don't think so. I wouldn't use it for something like ceremonies or talking heads like the toasts or interviews with your couples or whatnot like that. You probably could get away with it during portraits or other things where having to keep something in focus that long is essential. So I would play around with that if I were you, figure out what works for you. But for me, I know it's not going to be reliable enough for me to use it all day. So what am I excited about with this camera? Because I know this has a lot of really cool things. This also has some things that it didn't really improve on, like the autofocus. But some of the things I'm really excited about is that dynamic range boost that I talked about earlier. And with that comes also improved low light, because of that dynamic range boost, cleaning up the shadows and giving you more highlight retention, you can actually take this camera up to easily 12,800 and not experience like almost any noise. So you actually are getting very similar performance to that of the GH5S, which I don't think I've ever taken higher than 12,800, even in extreme low light scenarios. Most of the time I have a light, or there is a good enough light source that's lighting my subject enough that I've never had to take it up that high or any higher. So the fact that I can do that in a camera that also has IBIS is really cool. The only thing I guess that would make it better is AF. But there are some things that do make it really cool, such as ProRes recording. Yes, you can record internally in ProRes, and there's more features that are coming soon to improve on that. I know right now you can record in the 5.7K modes in Apple ProRes internally, and pretty soon in a future update, they are going to provide 4K and 1080 ProRes recordings internally as well. So you are going to have a wide array of recording options and codecs for you at your disposal in camera without needing to use an external monitor. That's awesome. That's really cool. I love that. But obviously with that comes higher bit rates, which means more data. You're going to be filling up your cards faster. You're going to be filling up your hard drives faster, and you're going to have to buy more of those. So in the run and gun world, in the craziness of wedding filmmaking, that might be a bit of a challenge for most of you. So maybe it's easier to just stick with the internal 10-bit recordings and not necessarily ProRes, but I'll let you decide that. I know for me, I don't necessarily think I need it, but it's nice to have in scenarios where maybe I'm going to second shoot for someone who wants me to do that, or the technology and the availability of hard drives and SD cards becomes more cheap and accessible, that I can make that happen. The other thing I'm excited about is just the improved IBIS. The GH5 boasted about 5.5 stops of internal body stabilization, and the GH6 is now offering 7.5 stops. You add that with the IS of the lenses like the 12-35 or the 35-100, and you have a stabilization powerhouse. So that is unreal. Like, Panasonic was already great at that with the GH5, and now they took it even a step further. So that's so cool. Do I think it's a good replacement for a gimbal? Probably not. There's a lot of things that a gimbal can do that just walking around handheld will never be able to match. But it's pretty close. So that's nice. That is neat. That is really neat. But I do want to talk a little bit about the concerns of this camera. My biggest thing is just the reliability of the autofocus. That is something that I've been noticing more and more, is that there are some shots that you just miss. And I know it's not me. I know I see other people complaining about it. Is like, I thought I had this shot, the focus peaking was good, and it's still soft. I still missed the mark, and sometimes it's just enough that it doesn't make the shot usable. And that hurts, that sucks. And I really need some more reliable autofocus in order to feel like I can just use this camera. I don't have to worry about things, and I don't have to use so much more mental energy towards things, because I'm using that towards manual focusing, and my hand is under the lens, manual focusing, when it could be in a more stable spot and I can be getting more unique angles. But no, I have to keep my hand under the camera, rack focus, and make sure that's good. And that affects how I'm able to control the camera. Other than that, I'm fine with manual focus. I've gotten used to it. I know a lot of other people have gotten used to it, and it's a common thing in the cinematography world that cameras are manual focus. So I understand why they kept it. They want this to be a pro video camera for people who are on sets using focus pullers and other fancy doodads for that. But it still kind of is weird that they haven't added that into this camera yet. So for a wedding filmmaker, is that going to be a deal breaker? For most of you, probably. A lot of people are relying more and more on autofocus, so it's likely that it's not meant for everyone, but someone like me or some other people who are using GH5s already or other cameras and just manual focusing themselves anyways, it's nothing different. You just get some better features around that as well. So that's cool. One of the other kind of cons, and I haven't talked about this yet, is battery features. You can use the original GH5 batteries on this, but you are going to lose some features in that, such as filming in 4K 120 and 5.7K at 60 frames per second. Certain features are just going to be completely turned off when you're using this original GH5 batteries. You're going to have to get those new batteries that were introduced in the S5, right? The S5? Yes, the S5. You're going to have to start using those batteries in there. So if you've already collected a lot of GH5 batteries, sure, you can use them, but it's going to make more sense to do that. The battery life isn't horrible, but it could be better. At continuous recording, doing all of the things, not turning your camera off, you might get somewhere between an hour to an hour and a half, which some of you are like, whoa, dude, that's awesome. Why is that bad? Because sometimes it just gets low at the wrong moment and you have to find it in your pocket or hope that you have another battery in your pocket and you just got to swap it and you may have missed a moment. I love the idea of not having to worry about battery power. I love the idea of not having to worry about certain things so that I can just stay focused in the moment on the wedding, capturing the precious once in a lifetime moments that are happening on the day. So if I don't have to think about battery power, if I don't have to think about the reliability of the autofocus, if I don't have to think about a lot of these things, I can be more focused on my job and capture amazing content for the couples that have trusted the documentation of their day in me. So my overall thoughts, is this camera a great camera for wedding filmmakers? Sure, why not? I think you can't really go wrong with getting this camera. If you're a GH5 user and the manual focus is not an issue for you and all you've really needed is just a little better low light performance, get the GH6. It's amazing. It's actually retailed at $21.99 right now. So it's not too bad of an upgrade. It's a lot cheaper than a lot of the competition out there, such as the R5, the A7S III. I'm not entirely sure what the A7 IV is. I'll pop it up here right now. There's a lot of cameras that are just a lot more expensive than that. And this is definitely competing with all of those cameras, and there's a lot of potential for this camera to really be good. But I don't think this camera is for everyone. I think there's a lot of people out there who really do need reliable autofocus, who aren't practiced well enough in manual focus. I think there are some people who just need a camera that is more reliable and has better compression, better video formats to just make their workflow a lot easier. And this camera is really trying to target more higher end professional, like cinematographers, not event shooters. You can use this for it, and I would urge anyone who's like considering this, like, sure, check it out, try it out. It's a cool camera. I think you're gonna have a great time. But I don't think it's for everyone, and I know that seems like a very political answer, not really giving a straight up forward answer. But even I'm torn. I am looking at my cart right now and I have multiple cameras in it, and one of them is the GH6, and I have no idea what I'm going to get. This camera definitely has a lot of really cool features that could be really cool, but so do other cameras in the market. So do your research, figure out what works best for you and your brand and how you shoot, and go with it. Practice, 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 and you're gonna have a great time regardless. I hope this information was helpful for you guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, drop us a comment below, subscribe, do all of those things. Hit the bell icon for future notifications, and we'll see you guys in the next one.